Caleb Martin's tenure with Miami came to an end on Saturday. What happened with Miami's reported offer, and how do the Heat move on without Martin? Is it more imperative than ever that Miami bring back Highsmith? And Kel'el Ware made his Summer League debut on Saturday. We break it all down on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day, Monday to Friday. I'm Wes Goldberg. I'm the editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil, both of us credentialed Heat media members. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everybody every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're going to talk about Kel'el Ware's Summer League debut and some other free agent options here in a minute. But let's start with Caleb Martin, who signed a 4-year, $32 million deal with the Philadelphia 76ers. Could be worth up to $40 million when you include incentives. But the big point here is that he reportedly turned down a 4-year, $58 million extension from the Heat before opting out of his $7.1 million player option. So essentially what that would have done, he would have had to opt into the $7.1 mil. So it would not have become a free agent this summer, would have made the $7 million next year, but then would have gotten the $58 million every for the 4 years after that. So sort of making up for, hey, take less right now, we'll make up for it on the back end. That would have been the case for Caleb. And for Miami, obviously, you keep a really good player and you stay under that second apron. It would have given them a little bit more flexibility potentially under that second apron if he would have agreed to that contract. Nope, doesn't do that. Says, I think there's more money out there in the free agent market. Bet on that. Maybe bet on maybe it being a more bullish market in general, not just for him, but we don't have not seen a ton of money spent on outside free agents this summer in general, outside of, Paul George and Klay Thompson and DeMar DeRozan. But right. Only one team really has used the full mid-level. I think DeAnthony Melton is the only free agent signed to a full mid-level exception. It's him or maybe one other one, but not a lot of money out there. Caleb Martin kind of got pushed down, his value and got pushed down in that regard, and so he takes less money in what amounts to a pretty disappointing deal for Caleb Martin. So before we talk about the Heat part of this, let's talk about the Caleb Martin part of this too. What did you just make of his offseason, just sort of in general, in this decision?
Disappointing for him. I think to be able to capitalize on this opportunity, like this was his payday. He was right in thinking that there might be other opportunities there. I just think that a lot of teams, agents, and players have misjudged the market with this new CBA and the implications of the tax apron and everything else like that. And there's a lot of kind of gauging. This is the first time it's happened, and so you're kind of just you can't dip your toes in the water because that's not how free agency works. So you kind of just you get thrown into the deep end and you either sink or drown, and you swim or drown, and a lot of people are drowning right now. There's a lot of missed opportunities there to cash in, and Caleb is just one of them. Haywood, who we'll talk about a little bit later, he's struggling right there too. So I think there are a lot of people expected to be able to collect on a payday that's just not going to be able to manifest for a lot of teams. And so I think it's a difficult decision for him. I'm sure he would have loved to have stayed here. I don't think there's any animosity between Martin and the front office or the coaching staff or the team or anything like that. He would have loved to have stayed here. He felt he and his agent, I should qualify, felt like they could collect more money elsewhere. It just didn't work out that way. So for Caleb, he gets an opportunity to go to a contender. He can win. He can go to a bigger market in theory in Philadelphia. They're probably a lot closer to title contention, certainly with Joel Embiid and Paul George, Tyrese Maxey. So it's a good opportunity for him. He may start. I think
sounds like he's starting.
A lot of people are already penciling him in there alongside Kelly Oubre. That's a lineup that he might wind up playing just as many minutes at the Ersatz power forwards position as he did in Miami. So it's unfortunate for him that he might wind up incurring injury and having to play out of position.
Woj actually included that in his ESPN write-up of the Caleb Martin deal, is that he's expected to start at power forward alongside Paul George in Philadelphia's retooled starting lineup. And I'm like, we'll see if he's him, Oubre, Paul George. It's just three wings next to Maxey and Joel Embiid. Who's the power forward? Who's the small forward? Who's the shooting guard? It's really immaterial, but it is a great spot for him, no doubt.
Yeah.
Like that's an awesome position for him to be in. The Philadelphia fit is a good one. It's unfortunate that he ends up going to an East rival. It's unfortunate that these two teams could end up, toe to toe in a playoff series, and you're looking at the playoff hero in the Eastern Conference Finals from 2 years ago, now playing for one of your biggest rivals in the Philadelphia 76ers. That part sucks, man. Like, it just does. But
Yes.
the other part that sucks for Caleb is that the money wasn't really out there. It was $8 million a year if you don't include the incentives. And I have no idea if these are unlikely incentives, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
he turned down 7.1. And he's only getting he's getting less than $1 million more based in guaranteed
This
salary.
season, yeah. Right.
So,
And with the tax situation in Miami, it probably would have he probably would have benefited. It probably comes out almost even in terms of like had he opted in and then what he would have been able to collect in the next 4 years. Like he lost close
he
to $10
does.
million.
And I do wonder if the Heat would have. I think the Heat and Caleb still had conversations even after he opted out. The Heat were very surprised that he did not pick up that extension. I'm surprised by how surprised the Heat were that Caleb didn't take the extension. And I think it was a very fair extension that the Heat offered. But it had been communicated to the Heat and communicated, like I've heard from sources, we're opting out. Like there was no scenario where Caleb Martin was making $7.1 million next year by picking that player option. They were opting out and they were going for the money this summer. They were betting on Caleb Martin in a relatively lame free agent market being one of the best names on the free agent market. Small fish or big fish, small pond type deal, right? Where it's like, okay, once Paul George is off the board, we're right there with everybody else, in terms of, value free agents. So they bet wrong. And I think the Heat really wanted Caleb Martin back, and I think they're disappointed by the decision. But once he did ultimately opt out, they kind of knew that he was gone. Although they did keep in touch with him.
Couldn't do anything.
And I don't know that
they couldn't really do anything.
Right. Even if you would have offered him, because they did have the bird rights, you could have offered him the same thing that Philadelphia offered him. And maybe there's a cost-saving move here to stay under the second apron. And I do think that was something that he tried to do. But even if, it was just going to be really hard after Caleb Martin opted out and said, I'm betting on myself. Trust me, the money's going to be out there. I'm not taking this extension. It was going to be really hard for him to kind of come back to Miami with his tail between his legs. So even if the money was even, like hypothetically, right, it might have just been a better move. It might have forced him out, right? It might have forced him to Philadelphia where it says, like, I just can't come back to Miami this embarrassed. I can at least write this off as, I don't know. It's a tough look. I don't know. I am speculating here.
Okay, yeah, because I don't think that plays into it. Like, I mean, I might be wrong. I understand there's an opportunity to kind of get your name up in marquee lights. You get a headline for yourself for a player who's never really had that, and that's since his, I don't know, high school career, probably. Like even collegiately, he wasn't like ever a big name, a headline maker. And so, like, this is a great opportunity to kind of create and establish a bigger name for yourself. But I don't think there's any shame in taking money and say, you know what, we gauged other opportunities. Agents and PR could always spin it and say, we looked at other opportunities, but the chance to come back here and continue to build on what we established for 3 seasons was just too good an opportunity.
But the cat was kind of out of the bag on the Caleb Martin thing too. It's like we're gonna go get the bag right now. But I guess you're right.
If they had just taken the same money, like if they had said, you know what, Martin was offered similar contracts elsewhere, but ultimately chose to come back to Miami, it would. You
could even write it off as a hometown discount.
Yeah, it would have been a better look for him, if anything.
Maybe.
I don't think he would have had his tail tucked, certainly. But I can understand, like, it's not passing up money. It's not like there was $15 million dangling somewhere out there, and he said, you know what, I'd prefer coming to Miami for 8.
Well, he did pass up the money, unfortunately, when they turned down the extension. He's just a 4-year, $32 million deal. Again, maybe there's some incentives, but it's not going to be as much as a 4-year, $58 million extension, even if you had to make 7.1 this next season. So
it would have been 5 years, $65 million, with him making $7 million basically had he opted in, and then 58 over the course of the next 4 seasons. That's what, 17 per year? Am I missing my math there?
Well, yeah. If you sort of do it that way, but I kind of look at it as the 4-year 58, so it's like what, 13 a year. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, more than what he ultimately ended up signing for with Philly.
Yeah. He
Um,
lost a lot of money. Lost a lot of money on this
tough,
deal. So it's
tough
unfortunate for
decision.
him. For the Heat, it's a tough look. I mean, they go all out. I think they made a good opportunity. I saw a headline from Ira Winterman, in his Ask Ira column, that whether or not Miami overplayed their hand. I don't agree with that. I don't think they did. I think they made the right offer, and something that was, look, next summer, Jimmy could potentially opt out and he could wind up leaving the team. But if you had Caleb under contract, at least there's some continuity there. Again, continuing to build on a player who may be entering his prime. I know a lot of people continue to look at last season, but I maintain that he was hurt and nursing a number of nagging injuries that kind of took out some of his efficiency from the previous
Mhm.
season. But to have an athletic wing that can shoot the three at a high clip, that can drive to the rim and put pressure on the basket, to that rebounds and plays defense at a high level. Like, remember, there were, for a lot of fans, kind of be like, oh, you know what, we're not missing anything by the loss of Caleb Martin. Like, he was at times their best wing defender last year when Jimmy wasn't as engaged or even available on the floor. I mean, Haywood was still an option, but they, again, Haywood missed some time too. They had Caleb out there guarding 1 through 4 on a number of
Yep.
occasions, and he handled his business. So I think it is a loss for Miami,
Yep.
and certainly, and I know you pointed this out on Twitter, but even just personally, like, Caleb was always great to talk to. Like, he's a really cool guy. Even I remember when he first joined the team, like
Mhm.
he was like the first time I spoke with him and like asked for him after a practice. It was like one of the first early practices with the team, and he was almost like surprised that anybody wanted to talk to him. Because again, he was a guy
Yeah.
who was like, he was Cody's brother in
It was
Charlotte,
it
and
was such a great story. Joins Miami. I don't want to hear
yeah.
about J. Cole. Joins Miami
Oh,
in 2021 on a two-way contract. Believe it or not, J. Cole didn't just call up the Heat and said sign him. They did the scouting
no,
work on Kel'el
Karan
Ware.
called J. Cole
Yeah, just
and confirmed that he was a good player.
so yeah, give J. Cole a ring or something. I'm so over this
Yes.
J. Cole story. It's so overblown. Um,
Eastern
whatever.
Conference Finals MVP, J. Cole.
Backed out of the Drake Kendrick beef because he knew he couldn't handle the Heat. Um, whatever.
Not the
How
same.
much
Not
are
the
the
same.
Heat gonna miss Caleb Martin? Does losing Caleb make re-signing Haywood Highsmith even more important? We talk about that. We're gonna talk about Kel'el Ware's summer league debut. We're gonna get to all of that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by FanDuel. Look, I love sports. You love sports. We all love them so much. We don't ever want them to stop. But the playoffs have wound down. Yeah, Major League Baseball and the WNBA are kicking it, but still, we've got fewer and fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want, because all you have to do is open up the app and dream up any bets at any time that you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus. That's daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So head over to fanduel.com right now and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Miami Heat talk every day, 5 days a week. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. So let's get to this from the Heat side of things. They're going to miss Caleb Martin, I think, quite a bit here. One of their most versatile sort of utility guys over the last couple seasons.
Yep.
Shoot the three, put the ball on the floor, attack the basket, versatile defender. Just a plug and play, do everything guy who Eric Spoelstra trusted quite a bit. And losing him now, it's tough. And you see why they wanted to bring him back, even though I questioned it last week. And I still sort of stand by, like, what's the plan here at the wing position? It just felt like there was too many bodies if everybody were healthy, and I don't know that you can necessarily afford to pay a bunch of guys basically as insurance policies if your best players got hurt. But Caleb Martin was still one of their better players. And now that makes Jaime Jaquez's job harder. It makes Nikola Jovic even more important to this roster. It makes Jimmy Butler more important to this roster in terms of being
Josh
there as an
Richardson.
every night player. Josh Richardson, who may or may not be ready for the start of the season, makes him more important. Heck, if Bam Adebayo is going to play forward, that makes more minutes at forward more important for Bam Adebayo. So what are they losing now with Caleb Martin? And you mentioned a good, like, the continuity part of it, I think is a big one. The Heat culture fit was a big one. And now if you're the Heat, over the last 2 years, you've lost Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, and Caleb Martin. Two of your greatest development story successes over the last few years in franchise history.
Three.
Yeah. You've lost those three guys, and maybe another one in Haywood Highsmith, who we'll get to here in a second, for basically nothing other than a second round pick that you got in a sign and trade from the Cavs. I don't know how that's a tough look on paper, but I get it, right? Like, what were they gonna do? Right? Were you going to trade Gabe or Max midway through the 2022-23 season? No, you were going for it.
Yeah.
Were you going to trade Caleb in February? No, you were still trying to make noise in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But it is hard to lose these guys for nothing at the same time. Both things can be true.
It's tough. You accept it though, because again, I mean, no crystal ball exists that lets you know that Jimmy and Terry Rozier are going to get hurt, weeks before the playoffs start or a week before the playoffs start, and that you're going to basically be swept by the Boston Celtics. Had they had that crystal ball available, I'm sure they probably would have considered a trade much more. They probably wouldn't have pulled off the trade for Terry Rozier, if we're being 100% honest, but that's not the reality. They didn't have that available. They thought that last year they were going to be able to be competitive in the postseason. And whether that's realistic or not, we'll never know, because the opportunity didn't manifest and players weren't healthy. They weren't available. They kept Caleb. I still think it was a good move. Again, we talked about, you mentioned that you thought the team was surprised that Caleb didn't accept the offer when they made it to him. I think they thought that he was going to be part of the team for the long haul, that when we take the time to develop our guys, that you'll kind of take not necessarily a hometown discount, but that you'll pass up the opportunity this year to make more money so that next year you'll be able to collect a lot more money. And I think they thought that Caleb was going to be part of this team moving forward, that if and when Jimmy does decide that he doesn't want to be part of this Heat organization anymore, at least they'd have Caleb as part of it moving forward, because, they took the time to develop him. So it's tough, but you wish him well. I don't think the Heat have any bad blood or concerns about that. Gabe Vincent did a great job for the couple seasons he was here in Miami. Max Strus, similarly. Caleb was here for 3 years. They were great. They were memorable years. But I think, to the bigger overall question, and I know that you brought it up already, it's Miami has to make Haywood Highsmith a priority. I just think at that point in time, you kind of have to do what you can to bring him back. Like, they might not be able to. There might be other financial opportunities for Haywood outside of Miami. But if we're talking about similar dollars, you have to do what you can to try and keep him. And I know that maybe it's not the look that a lot of Heat fans are concerned with, or they might not have wanted Haywood to be a priority for this team. But I think, again, you've invested the time. Haywood does have potential. We were both bullish on Haywood as a potential starter last year before the season. I think he needs to be part of this team moving forward, because you're going to have injuries to Jimmy that aren't going to make him available for 82 games. And that being the case, you're going to need somebody that you can rely on to provide high-level perimeter defense that can occasionally shoot to three from the perimeter, although 40% probably isn't realistic for him to reach.
Low volume.
Yeah, low volume. So at the very least, you want to be able to bring that. I'm more concerned about your perspective, because last week you basically said, why would they bother bringing back Haywood Highsmith? And now that we're at a further point in this discussion with Caleb gone, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. Do you think they need to make it kind of go 180 and make Haywood a priority moving forward?
I just don't know where he fits in, right? I think you need somebody at this position. You need another forward, and just having Keyshawn Johnson on a two-way ain't going to cut it. We don't know if that guy's an NBA player or not. I like him. We don't know. Right. And so you mentioned, like, Jimmy Butler's not, even if he's engaged in a contract year, he's not playing 82 games, right?
No.
And so whatever 15, 20 games he misses, Jaime Jaquez Jr. basically becomes your only wing on the roster now, with Caleb gone and Haywood Highsmith unsigned.
Alec Burks.
So yeah, Alec Burks could play some minutes there. Josh Richardson, but those guys are sort of more guard, backcourt guys.
For sure.
Right? So you're already kind of making yourself smaller. Maybe there's lineups where you play Bam with a center and Jovic plays the three. Like, they might be forced into that depending on what happens here. But they need a body. They need a body. My concern is, are you going to pay that body a lot of money to be a body, right? If you're really leaning into Jaime Jaquez and Nikola Jovic as your forwards of the future, and you got to get those guys more minutes, more opportunities, more responsibilities. And so that was always my thing is, I love Caleb Martin. I love Haywood Highsmith. financially, does it make sense to bring them back at $7 million plus a year? Where if I don't know where they're going to play, that was always my question. So I do think that the Heat are, but that's just what I think. The Heat are going to circle the wagons on Haywood Highsmith again. And I do think that he becomes sort of the priority. And they'll just say, you know what, let's pay this guy. Let's bring him back. We figure out the fit and the depth chart later. I think that's probably the quote unquote plan, although he's an unrestricted free agent. I don't know how much you can plan around that. But yeah, that becomes the guy. If not him, then you got to go find somebody else. Is it Chetty Osman on a minimum? Is it like something like that? To me, not as good of a player as Haywood Highsmith, but somebody on a minimum contract who you don't feel like you need to play all the time either, who's obviously cheaper and provides more financial flexibility going forward.
Yeah.
That's the other option, but it depends on
you
what
have a
Highsmith
list?
does. No.
Do you have a
really.
list?
No, I'm so.
You don't have a list?
You'd think I would, but it's like I'm like in my head. I'm thinking Robert Covington, Chetty Osman. These are the guys.
Covington.
But also you can go the other
Covington.
way and say, all right, you know what? Push comes to shove. We have Alec Burks. We have Josh Richardson. They could play spot minutes on the wing. Do we need more of a traditional point guard? Because they have 13 guys under standard contract. You can hold up to 15 on the NBA roster outside of the two-way guys. The Heat typically carry 14. So I assume they're only going to carry that 14th player. The other problem here, too, is the Heat like to have that flexibility to be a player on the buyout market. If you bring back Haywood Highsmith as the last guy on the roster, all these guys have guaranteed contracts. It becomes really difficult to waive and sign somebody. So it's not impossible,
Kashad,
but
like he might wind up getting a lot of minutes just by default.
I know. And it feels like it's a year too early for that to happen, right?
For sure.
So
he might provide a spark, and as an older collegiate player, that's fine. But NBA experience is completely different. Yeah, I think they're kind of out on Kane. Like everything that they've done so far kind of shows that they're not really a believer in what he can do. At least Johnson has the strength and kind of the heft necessary to play a little bit of power forward. Like smallish nonetheless, but you're gonna have to hope that Jovic has a really great year at the spot. And given his injury situation, I don't know that you can reliably count on that. And like you brought up the possibility, well, maybe you might wind up having different lineups with Bam at the 4. Kevin Love could play the 4 now that you have Kel'el Ware there, and you bring back Thomas Bryant. Maybe that's the plan: is that you're bringing in all these centers with Love and Bam kind of as your forwards now moving forward.
It throws your young guys into the fire, right? Just as much as Jaime Jaquez and Nikola Jovic, they have more on their plate now with Caleb and potentially Haywood leaving. There's a lot on Kel'el Ware's plate now too, right? Because, hey, if you could be our starting center, now we could fill forward minutes with Bam, who would be elite at that position. But we need to know we have an answer at center. We can't be bad at center. We're not going to just move Bam over and be bad at another position that used to be a position of strength for us, right? So it puts a lot more on Kel'el Ware to be ready to go at some point this season. So there's a trickle-down effect here, man. It's real, and it speaks to the talent drain over the last couple of years. Gabe, Max, Caleb gone, maybe Haywood, depending on what happens with him. And that's why you have to nail the draft. To the Heat's credit, they have, right? Nikola Jovic, that worked out. Jaime Jaquez, great pick. We'll see with Kel'el Ware. But if these guys don't hit and aren't ready to go, it just makes it really hard. It makes it really difficult.
Who's a good name available? I was just looking at it right now. Precious Achiuwa. Can you bring him back?
Restricted free agent. We'll see what happens with him. I don't know that the Heat can afford him. Is the problem.
Probably not.
He's got a qualifying offer of like $10 million. I don't even know if it's possible. Kel'el Ware and Preston, his summer league debut. What did we like? What we didn't like? We'll talk about that next year on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, you're always at a point in time where you probably need to talk to somebody, and that's okay. Like some people have a stigma about, having to open up about their feelings. But I think more and more we're starting to recognize how important it is to do what you can for your mental health. And if that's the case, then you probably need to talk to somebody to get an unbiased perspective. And I think if you're looking for somebody that you want to talk to, it's not just a coworker or a family member, because maybe there's an issue with them that you don't feel comfortable sharing, then you're probably thinking of giving therapy a try. And if that's the case, then maybe you should consider BetterHelp, because you can stop comparing yourself to others and start focusing on your own health when you go to BetterHelp. And visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnBA. It's really easy. very convenient. I said it before. You go, fill out a questionnaire. Within a matter of minutes, you're matched up with a licensed therapist that can help you out entirely online, designed to be convenient for you. If for whatever reason your schedule changes and you can no longer use that therapist or no longer visit them at a time that's convenient for you, they switch it and it's no charge at all. You don't have to worry about it. A friend of mine had a therapist that they were using, had to change in their schedule. Next thing you know, made the switch, no charge at all. So visit betterhelp.com/lockdownba. If you visit today, you get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockdownba. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Let us know in the comments section what the Heat need to do at the forward position. Do they need to bring back Haywood Highsmith? Do they need to go in another direction? What free agents available do you want the Heat to target? Also, follow us on your favorite podcast app. Recording this on a Sunday afternoon after the Heat's first Summer League game in the California Classic. They played the Warriors Summer League team. Kel'el Ware made his Summer League debut. 12 points, 6 rebounds, 5 blocks. There was stuff I liked a lot.
Yeah.
There was some stuff that concerned me, if I'm being honest. Yeah. But let's start with the good stuff. What did you like?
I think defensively more than anything else, like just a big body that Miami has not had, kind of occupying the middle for a long time. There was a lot of nice kind of recovery there to be able to block and or alter shots. And I think that was the best part of his game, at least from what I saw, was just the opportunity to get just him stretching his arms out and realizing, hey, Miami has the tallest player out on the floor.
Yes.
And it's swatting shots. It's like, this is really unusual. It's not 6'5" Caleb Martin playing the center spot. Yeah. So it was kind of nice to see, but just the timing on the blocks, so it helps a lot when you're, have a 7'4" reach, 7'5" reach. So he certainly made the use of occupying that space. So that's what I like the most, watching him play in his debut there.
They played him primarily in drop, and he, to your point, used that long reach, the long wingspan to just corral ball handlers. He made an impact. I mean, he spreads his arms out, and it's the entire painted area, and that's tough for opposing guards to puncture. And you saw that. And I know it's summer league ball, whatever. He's still going to be that big. He's always going to be that big. Summer league, NBA, doesn't matter. And that's kind of the coolest part about him. I like that they used him in drop. I like that we saw a glimpse of what he wants to do. He did get out on the perimeter. It wasn't like Hassan Whiteside planted 5 feet away from the basket and I just stand here. Right? He was able to get out on the perimeter a little bit. We do know that they're going to coach him up to help him slide his feet a little bit better and all these things. And I think he has that. He's not a stiff the way that maybe somebody like Romeo Yurtsevin, Orlando Robinson in the past have been, right? He can do that stuff. So I loved what I saw from him defensively. A little too, and I pointed this out in our blue notebook, and I pointed it out after they drafted him, and it's something I'm monitoring with him. Too jumpy. A little too eager to be blocking shots. Sometimes it's enough just to alter the shot, be a big body, be that defender. You don't got to leave your feet all the time, buddy. And I know the Heat know this, and they're gonna iron that out. They're gonna have to coach it out of him. But he's real jumpy, and it's a bad habit that he obviously has developed. And bad habits are hard to break. And that to me is one of my biggest priorities from the Heat is that gets scouted. Summer League thing, that's one thing. In the NBA, veterans, they're gonna see that. Veteran ball handlers, they're gonna smell blood with that, and that guy's gonna get into foul trouble way too much if he doesn't clean that thing up.
Even with the change in officiating, I think it's just too easy for NBA players. Yeah. You leave your feet, they're going to lean into you, whether you establish contact or not. And again, even with the change in the rules, I think it's going to look this very tall, still somewhat awkward physically. Rookie is going to be fouling James Harden. Like who's going to get that call? Like that. I mean, you don't even have to be Harden. I mean, Jalen Brunson, Luka Doncic, etc. Think of the number of players that can bait.
Bogdan Bogdanovic has been in the league in a long time, and he's going to bait him into it. It's that obvious with him. It's so easy with him, and it's the thing that stood out to me on tape when I was watching him in Indiana when we were scouting him was this guy's really jumpy. Now I don't want to go too hard on him. He's a rookie. It happens, but it is. I just want to bring it up for fans. It's the 5 blocks. It looks really cool on paper. I'd rather him have 2 blocks, alter more shots, and draw and pick up fewer fouls and stay on
Well,
the court.
he didn't get into foul trouble yesterday,
No,
but
he
that's
didn't.
also summer league.
But it's
It's
summer league. That's what I'm point. That's the
yeah,
point. It's
yeah.
like when he goes up
You
against
don't
real
have that
NBA
star.
players who have seen a scouting report.
Right.
I mean, that's going to be day one stuff, man. Like,
Yeah.
this is going to be an issue. I'm telling you. So
It's good
but-
training camp. Like, I can't
Right.
wait for Jimmy to like be like, "Oh, you think you're
You
gonna
know
block
what?
my shot?" The foul.
Such a good point. Jimmy should go hard at him. Be like, hey, man, stay down. Stay down. So the Heat, like I said, I trust them to iron it out. But it's something that they got to deal with. They can't ignore it. And they won't.
Yeah.
Offensively, I like a lot of what I saw. Again, the guy's really big on both sides of the court, turns out. And Zion Pullen had a couple of nice entry passes to him and lobs to him. I'm really, really intrigued to see what it looks like with an NBA level pick and roll ball handler like Terry Rozier with Kel'el Ware, because I think that can really unlock him. It just sort of felt, again, summer league ball. These guys are just now playing together for the first time in their lives. The offense didn't look awesome as expected, but when you're in a flowing offense with real structure, with real experienced NBA players, I think that can unlock Kel'el Ware a little bit more on the roll, because that's the thing I want to see more from him. It was just too much of no structure in the offense.
Yeah.
And Kel'el Ware just sort of rolling on a pick and roll and then turning around and trying to establish post-up position way too early in the shot clock. Again, something I saw on tape from him in Indiana was he really likes that post-up early in the clock, and that's sort of his move. I want to see him just roll hard to the basket, facing up, and not turning around.
Until he's strong enough
to
be able to create those offensive opportunities for himself and be able to maximize those post-ups that utilize his height fully, it's going to be somewhat of a problem. And I've told, once he gets up to that point, but until he gets to that point, he's going to require a competent ball handler that can create opportunities for him. And that's been a problem for Miami. Like, and you know, they haven't had somebody like that until they got Rozier. And I don't think we really got a chance to see it maximizing the limited playing time that we saw, because he was still trying to get his feet wet. He was still trying to get acclimated to what Miami's offense was. You know, Kyle Lowry, for all that he could do, wasn't really creating a lot of opportunities. That was the expectation, but I don't think it did not at that point in his career. So he needs somebody to get those looks for him so that he could just have really easy looks at the basket. I'd love to see Jimmy in that situation, because again, Jimmy as a ball handler, I could see him drawing those double teams where he kind of draws somebody. Next thing you know, you've got a wide open Ware diving for the basket to finish with a dunk. Like, who's going to get in the way of all 7 foot of him being able to dive to the basket? So I think
it's another point too. I don't want to make this too much of a Jimmy Butler conversation, but if he's running more pick and roll, that helps Miami's offense a lot. It helps Kel'el Ware. It helps Tyler Hero. It helps Terry Rozier having to play off the ball, getting to play off the ball a little bit more. It helps Bam Adebayo. All these things. So, yes, it's all those things. The one thing I really did like from Kel'el Ware, and Adam Simon mentioned this after they drafted him, willing three-point shooter. Willing three-point shooter. And when you talk about Miami's 2 stars, not necessarily willing three-point shooters. Having willing three-point shooters is really important. Even Tyler Hero, who's easily their best three-point shooter, not all the time a willing three-point shooter, right? Yeah. This guy is very eager to just pick and pop, and I like that part of his game. The shot was a little, it wasn't super efficient. He needs to clean it up a little bit. Sometimes it looks a little awkward, right? The release isn't perfect. But the Heat have worked with much more broken shots in the past and turned those guys into average three-point shooters. So I like his feel. He's got good touch. He had that one shot, man. What was that weird? Like, it was like the 3rd or 4th quarter, that turnaround. It wasn't even a baby sky hook. It was like an underhand pitch in like a softball game. And it went in, and I was just like, what on earth was that?
His first shot was like that weird push shot as the shot clock was winding down. And it's just like, you see some of, I mean, I'm not making a comparison, so please do not, take these words out of my mouth. But like, you see with Wembanyama, like a guy who's his height, like the way he just like does things. He's like holding a tennis ball in his hand. So it's like, you just do things differently with a basketball in the palm of your hand when you're that size. And I think for Ware, it's like, he's just a big player out there, and he needs to have much more touch. But I think we started to see some positives yesterday. I'm curious to see how he bounces back. There's another game late today, Sunday afternoon, to see whether or not he can handle that. But he played a lot of minutes in game 1. Let's see how he bounces back in game 2, and maybe he makes the focus of just being a lot more effective. It's also like last year, the California Classic provided Jaime a great opportunity to show he was ready, that he was a guy who had been an older collegiate player, but he was also ready for the NBA game, at least in summer league. And then he wound up getting hurt and didn't really show out. He didn't really have an opportunity until training camp. I wonder if Ware takes the opposite path, where he kind of struggles early on, but as he gets more and more familiar with summer league and NBA type action, whether he continues to improve. That's what I'm watching. I'm looking out for over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, with Jaime, you could just tell the guy was
he
way
was
more
ready.
polished. But with Kelel, the thing that guy is a monster athlete, and that to me is not going away, and that's being proven. I think we knew that already just from the tape, but it's being proven even in summer league, and I don't think that goes away at the NBA level. I don't want it to sound like we're hating on him, because
not at all.
I was really excited having watched him. I really liked the stuff I saw in that drop defense stuff and his ability to kind of shuffle his feet and be in position.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, the blocks, there were possessions where he just altered the shots, and those to me were way more impressive than the blocks. Like that's the stuff that I look for. But the blocks are also great. Some great help side stuff too in terms of the shot blocking. But there's going to be a lot of people out there that are just like hyping him up and blind to some of the concerns and just like,
or vice versa.
This guy is not a finished product. I think
right.
I just, that's what I kind of wanted to do here, was create like sort of like a balance of here's what excites us about him. Here's what the coaches are going to work on with him as a rookie.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're looking at. So, really excited to see what he looks like on Sunday. Really excited to see what he looks like in Las Vegas, later this week. Which I'll get a chance to see him in person, 6:30, I think, Eastern next Saturday against the Celtics, Miami's first summer league game. Kel'el Ware probably is expected to be a part of that. But that'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. We'll be back later this week with more free agent news, more on the summer league, all that stuff. But for now, thanks for listening. Thanks for following us on YouTube and your favorite podcast app.